Welcome to the Arts Access Florida podcast series, When Freedom Rings. In this 6-part series, we speak with our Black and Brown community on what has transpired in the art world since the emancipation of slavery on June 19, 1865. We have open conversations on their experiences as people of color and their contributions to art, community, and education. The series highlights their continued efforts to move the needle forward. This is When Freedom Rings. Welcome to episode 2, From Otherness to Radical Joy. Today we speak with Wanda Raimundi Ortiz, a nationally and internationally recognized award-winning interdisciplinary visual and performance artist. We speak with her on the intersections of her life and how being a light-skinned afro-latina have informed her experiences and informed her art. Her goal is to bridge gaps, interrogate the art world systems, and make people of color, particularly women, more visible in our world. Good morning, Wanda. Thank you so much for being on this episode of When Freedom Rings. We're very happy to have you. Would you please just take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, my name is Wanda Raimundi Ortiz. I am a visual artist, currently living in Orlando, Florida.
Tell us a little bit about how you started in art.
Gosh, that's like asking, how do you start breathing? I think, I've always been super creative. I always was attracted to comic strips and how the comic strips were drawn and characters and fashion and, cartoons and storytelling.
So you say you were attracted to comic books. What was one of your favorite ones?
Oh gosh, I mean, what little girl doesn't love Wonder Woman, right? But think also, oh, I liked like Betty and Veronica, those little like Archie comics. And I enjoyed, like Superman, Batman. I know I'm crossing universes, and people are gonna,
Be like, hold on.
like, right, like the DC and Marvel comics. So a little bit of everything, but really it was just about how you can tell a story visually.
So in a lot of your work, you say that it reflects some of your life and it's based on some of your background. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, things like that?
So I was born and raised in the Bronx. I'm Puerto Rican. And growing up in the hood is unique, right? It's a unique experience to, especially in a place like New York City, in a cultural hub like New York City, where your neighbor is Guyanese and the other neighbors, Jamaican, and somebody else from Japan, and then the guy up the road is Irish, and then the guy in the grocery store is Dominican, and so it was really being around so many different people is a masterclass in diversity and inclusion, right? Especially if it's you all included in the same kind of oppressive situation, right? So
Right.
you're all in the same kind of pressure cooker. And so those stories of being in the hood, kind of being together, and also how we kind of like sifted and separated, also kind of inspired, a lot of my work. But really, like the need to make the work the way I make it was kind of my way of making heads or tails of the the need to separate us and to identify and quantify us as individuals, and who decided that needed to happen, and what's my place in that story, and what's my place as a Puerto Rican in the United States. Um, Before I even understood that this is what I was doing, I was exploring colorism. I confronted colorism because I'm so fair skinned compared to people in my neighborhood, my friends. Having to kind of prove my pedigree in the hood, proving pedigree in the hood is
Sounds hard.
well,
Maybe
I mean,
impossible.
I think we all do it, right? We all do it. We feel like, who walks harder, who got the baddest coat, this, that, the other thing. And then I think because of my fair skinness compared to everybody else that I was around, made me like a target, that's that wannabe white girl. Like, nah, not really, kid. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then and then being artistic and creative, that's, you're not supposed to be that way. When the only way you're doing that is if you're doing graffiti. You can't be doing anything else. And so there's always this kind of all these multiple intersections just living in the hood. And so the work was a refuge for me and a place for me to tease these things out, especially since I didn't have the right words for it. We weren't talking about anti-racism back in the day. We weren't talking about all this stuff. We were just kind of coexisting, trying to coexist and trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
out where you stand, and to have the audacity to dream to be an artist when artists don't make money. That's
Mm-hmm.
real working class. Like, so that's, so to be able to dream that way is like audacious.
Your work has really helped you kind of sift through your own identity and sift through the even the construct of what identity is and how everybody supposedly has to be in these certain boxes. Would you say
Certainly
that?
that, certainly that. As an artist, I guess I'm one of the artists that is, primarily focused on identity-based art, identity-based work. But really, like, it's just the art has been the byproduct of my trying to figure out who I am in this place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a good artist friend of mine, Sean Leonardo, said in a lecture once that identity is something that you try on, and you kind of
Ah,
keep trying on these things, and you perform these versions until you find the one that fits.
right.
And I think we've all done that, if you're preppy, believe it or not, I was a goth in high school. What?
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, yeah, that I wasn't inviting any problems in the hood. Goth, that's whatever.
You weren't standing out.
No, no, I wasn't sticking out with an art, with an MC jacket and paratrooper boots and, a giant portfolio case, walking to the train. Um, And so the art, I think it's more of the byproduct of that, trying to figure out who I am. I've done works where and I find that I've focused so much on self-portraiture, um, because I was trying to figure out who I look like,
Mm,
you know? I mean, I look like my mom. I have traces of my dad and that lineage, but also this, the fact that people always have trouble placing me. And it's
yeah.
like, well then that's coming from this prescription of what Puerto Rican is supposed to look like, what Black is supposed to look like,
Mm-hmm.
what Dominican is supposed to, and then we have these ideas, and everybody's kind of bought into the structure of what was supposed to, this made up structure of race.
You did speak to me about that you describe yourself as Afro-Latina. Would you give your own definition of what that means?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm Afro Latinx, right? I was born
Mm-hmm.
in the hood. I was born in the Bronx. I'm of Puerto Rican. I'm from the Puerto Rican diaspora, right?
Mm-hmm.
Born in the United States. Um, of and my lineage from my mother's side, there's a direct line of Afro Puerto Ricanness, right? And so I say that out loud because it's important to acknowledge who we are because of colorism, because of the need to, that people seem to need to. They may not know what to do with me, so let me just clarify. This is where I stand,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
then also, and also because I think it's important to that kind of ownership and understanding who you are makes you stand firmly in both culturally, but also prepares you to do the kind of cultural work for opening up these conversations about anti-blackness and racism within the Caribbean culture,
Right.
right? We witness the conversations about getting your hair straightened, about not making sure to like marry light or white, and so to kind of improve the race. All these like really awful, dirty little things that happen within
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean, not just Puerto Rican, but within the Caribbean, within colonized peoples,
Mm-hmm.
and this idea if white is right. And so it is very important for me to anchor myself in this so that I know who I am, but so that other people know that I know who I am.
Right.
I'm not trying to like fake the funk that, there's an amazing sentence, a phrase that is used a lot. And it was popularized in a song. I forgot who sang it, but the line is, "Y tu abuela dónde está?" And your grandmother, where's she? Right? And so this, kind of challenging this idea of what you think you're light skinned, but where's your grandmother? Huh?
Right. And I
And
think
that never left me.
right. And I think what you do too is you also, by you being so firm in who you are and understanding yourself and helping to have these conversations, you're probably helping someone out there who's seeing your work who maybe there's something familiar in your story that is familiar to them and maybe they don't know their history or don't know anything at all and it gives them a little bit of a glimpse of something. So it's
Yeah, and I
important.
think, yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because I think it's also important for people to kind of take a look at where they might be standing. They might be sitting very firmly in some in a very anti-black stance
Mm-hmm.
within their families,
Right.
right? Where you would say, well, oh, I'm not black, I'm X. Where do you think that where do you think
Means.
that came from? Like, where do you think that came? Like, you need to go back a couple of steps. Like, in order for us to move forward in this narrative, to go to a post-racialized world, whatever that means or whatever that looks like, where we can start to like move beyond these characterizations, and move beyond these structures that have set us up to move within these very specific spaces, we have to be able to look at our shit. Oops, I'm sorry. We have to look at our
It's
stuff.
okay.
And and we have to look at it for ourselves, right? Because other people are going to tell our story anyway. So we should, if it's going to be out there, we should tell it the right way, and we should know who we are first. And then even the larger conversation, because it's not even about just what you identify as, but let's take a look and interrogate why this structure exists in your culture.
Mm-hmm.
What leadership was in your country at the time that was pushing a narrative of anti-blackness that potentially maybe threaten people's lives and would and we see this in American culture, but like let's look at the Caribbean, let's look at this, let's look at that. What narratives are being sold
Mm-hmm.
to you by force, possibly, that will make you actively deny what you know to be true when you look across your family, that it's easier to say that you're indigenous, it's easier to say that you're Spaniard, it's easier to claim these other things because it's a survival time, right? So
Right.
it's not trying to, I'm not trying to make people feel bad or demonize where they are, but we're far enough in this dialogue, and we have enough technology. We have to start to look at this in a larger context for ourselves as a community, and then maybe start healing.
So
It's a lot.
let's move. Yeah, it is a lot. It
It's a
is a lot.
light conversation on a Monday morning.
Yeah. Well, let's start with your work. Your early work was focused on women and their struggles, a lot of it, and you had Wepa Woman was one of your comic pieces.
So Wepa Woman was this character that I actually developed when I was about 19. And I was really curious to create this a narrative about this girl who looked nothing like me but embodied my ideas, right? Again,
Okay.
this, and even from very early on, I've always been questioning what I look like, and will people hear me and hear what I have to say, because I don't look the way other people expect me to look. And so
Right.
I created this character who looked Puerto Rican, dark, long, dark, flowy, like silky, kind of indigenous hair, and 36, 28, 36 hourglass body shape. That's also not me. And but she carried these sort of nationalistic ideas of Puerto Ricanness, and was very, very concerned about, you know, the value or the worthiness of Puerto Ricans in a larger context, kind of like what we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And it versus Chuleta, which is this hood ratchet chick from the hood, who's just like, screw you, whatever, like I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and this is just the streets is a whole other ball game. And so these two were always at odds with each other, which is kind of what I was experiencing as a young person.
Mm.
Like my mother telling me, just because we live in the hood doesn't mean you have to be hood. Um, with constantly being challenged that I was want to be white girl, that I wasn't down, that I wasn't this, that I didn't understand, that.
Yeah.
Um, and and even maybe even asserting without having the language, asserting the language of privilege on me. Not that I had any more money than anybody else, but I was going to public art school. I was doing different things. And so, I always felt that pushback. And so those narratives came out in these early works. So the adventures of Wepa Woman versus Chuleta Bitch. And
Mm.
so they're always going at each other's throats. Like, in some panels I made where Chuleta is like, she's in the, oh my gosh, she's in the Chinese buffet,
Okay.
and she's got a plate full of chicken wings. Like she's just like, yeah, I'm gonna eat the hell out of this. I'm gonna get my $15 worth. And then and Wepa Woman's like, no, put the plate down. Like she's like trying to not be ratchet. Like, please, like we already have these stereotypes. We don't need you making it any worse. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and these are like this sort of, it seems naive now, but also kind of telling of where like the battle between these two personas, which is actually the battle that I have within myself. Like you want to be this, but then you're like, oh, you worry that someone else is going to judge
Yep.
you, and
Yep.
you worry about, and this is a
It's
quintessential circumstance that happens with people from the perimeters, right? Where we're always worried, like, well, if
mm-hmm.
I do something, it's not just Wanda who did something, it's Wanda the Puerto Rican who took down
Yeah.
all the Puerto Ricans. Her behavior took down everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the kinds of battles that were happening throughout the Wepa Woman series. And then eventually going to Puerto Rico, I did a big mural at the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico in San Dulce. And in that space, like every time I did a mural, I was trying to incorporate the politics of the space. So I'm in Puerto Rico, first and only museum show in Puerto Rico for
Mm-hmm.
someone from the diaspora, for me personally. I'm in this space. And so I feel like I'm coming home. And I had these visions that me coming to Puerto Rico and showing on the motherland was gonna be like me coming through on a white horse in the Arc de Triomphe and in Paris or whatever, and
Yeah.
like having this homecoming. But that pomp and circumstance never happened for me, not through my family, not for anybody, because there was a whole other bunch of stuff happening. And also people in the island didn't recognize me as Puerto Rican.
Mm.
So that becomes a diaspora story where like you go anybody you're born in New York City, but you're Jamaican, but the second you go to Jamaica, you're not Jamaican, you're married. So they're
Yep.
kind of quantifying the hierarchy of how Rican are you, how Caribbean are you, how much this are you, how could you possibly be if you were born stateside?
Yes.
And with the added complication of Puerto Rico as a Commonwealth of the United States, it becomes even trickier. And so the character goes to the island, and she goes to genuflect in front of this tree of life that I created in the mural,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is a giant ficus tree that I drew, and it's got like the taina, an image of a taina, an image of an African woman, an image of a Spaniard woman, kind of hidden in the trees, and she goes to genuflect. So she goes back to Puerto Rico. She's genuflecting, but then the island kind of rejects her, like you're not one of us. So
Mm-hmm.
she has this kind of psychic break, like all of a sudden, I've been defending you for so long against Chuleta and all this other crazy shit, and here you're rejecting me. Like what?
Yeah.
She's rendered powerless, and she's confused by this flat out rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I incorporate my confusion and my disdain within the work. So that's why it's all autobiographical. Then the next one that appears after that, I got a commission to do Center for Puerto Rican Studies in Hunter College in New York. Wepa woman who's always her baby hairs are always popping, like she's always on
Perfect.
point.
Mm-hmm.
Her nails are broken, her hair's disheveled, she's confused, she feels like she's been cast out of Eden, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so her relationship starts to crumble with the island, like, because she doesn't feel welcome in the place that she's dedicated her whole life,
Yeah.
dedicated. And the hood don't want her neither. So like,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I everything you just said, my brain was like tick 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 tick, like ticking, because I feel like that is a very similar to like kind of my own life growing up. Because I mean, my parents weren't born here, so me and my siblings were born here, so we're American kids, but we have African parents, and it gets very confusing, and you can't it's hard to figure out where you belong. And I always had the issue of growing up, like, oh, you're trying to act like a little white girl, or you're a black white girl, or you're an Oreo, or all the little
Oreo,
terms
yeah.
they want to call it.
Oreo, coconut, yeah, all that.
Yeah. And I always remember finding it so, I always must like, I would sit to myself and think, oh, well, because I'm not being all these stereotypical what you think a black person is. Like, I'm not loud, I'm not talking about fried chicken, or all the silly little things that they would say. I'm therefore not black, which
Right.
I hated.
You're like,
I'm like, but I am.
you
And
don't see
what
that?
and yeah, and what would you know about it? And then it's like when I had the opportunities to go home back to where my parents grew up, I remember being so excited to go back and thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to blend in. It's going to be so great." And then I got there and it was like, "Oh, you're the American in Africa." Like, and it was like immediate. Like, they can tell as barely by looking at you. And I remember being so disappointed, being like, "Oh, I thought I was going to be like a part of the majority for once." Like, I was really, and it's just, yeah, when you're talking, I was like, yes, I feel like I totally understand that kind of confusion that it really is to understand like where you belong. And the reality is it's like, especially the kids in the diaspora who were brought here and born here, you kind of don't belong in either, and you kind of have to create your own, you know, your own place of belonging.
Right. That's common, especially among first generation kids
Mm-hmm.
that are born stateside and their parents were born. And so you're left toggling between these two very distinct um cultural
Worlds. Mm-hmm.
cultural situations, right? So it's like, you know, eating pasteles and McDonald's, eating, you know, arroz con gandules and, you know, pork fried rice from the chicken spot, you know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's your actual reality, but you're toggling between the two. And what what I find you know, the troubling part of all that also makes, if you channel it the right way, which is what my target was and
Mm-hmm.
why art became the way to do it, is to be a conduit. What I
Yeah.
found is that I am and you are the conduit. We are the translators.
Right.
We are versed in enough in either one of these systems that you can talk to your parents, you could talk to your grandparents or whatever. You could also
Mm-hmm.
talk to nieces, uncles, whatever, cousins, friends, kids,
Yeah.
and you understand both. And so we become these bridges and these bridges, these conduits, these transmitters, um, to maybe smooth out some of the bumps. Which at least
Yeah.
that has been something for me, like trying to smooth out these bumps. And we have this opportunity to be able to bridge gaps and connect people in different ways, so that it's not so bumpy.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to change anything, but just create the
Just a
bridges.
little bit more understanding.
And the work is about
Yeah.
creating, especially the Wepa Woman stuff was definitely about creating those pathways.
Also, I'm just curious, what does WEPA mean?
It's like we say, they, whoa, you know,
Okay.
so that comes
So it
from.
kind of means like yay, like joy, kind of.
Yeah, it's definitely like
Okay.
it's an
Okay.
acknowledgement. It's a
Okay. I asked because when I was a kid at my dance studio, we used to say "wepa" all the time. We had a couple different Spanish students at the studio, and like if we did really well on a competition or right before someone went on stage, we would just be like "wepa, wepa," and we would say it all the
Wepa.
time.
Yeah. So you were getting props. You were getting
Yeah,
props.
yeah, that's funny. So your work also has many other themes. Do
Yes.
you want to talk about what some of those are and kind of that transition process you've had over that this kind of post-COVID era? How you've kind of moved themes?
So I'll go the changes started happening way before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped doing the Wepa Women work probably about 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And the big changes that I left New York City to live in Florida. And I recognize that so much of the Wepa Woman story and the work that I made was a direct response to the stimulus of living in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always like that immediacy that it's this thing's happening right here, right now. And so I would use the work as a direct response. But once I left and I was no longer in an urban environment, at least not New York hood, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was like Spanish moss and tree-lined streets and oh, look, there's a porch swing. It was very different. It's where I was living. Sort of, I was kind of thrust into a middle class lifestyle overnight,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden, such a quiet space that then it gave me an opportunity to really to listen and
Mm-hmm.
process. And so that's when the Astruleta series really took off, because I started doing while I was still in New York, and into my graduate program, I started doing these Astruleta videos where, like, so, and I'll go forward just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The Wepa Woman versus Chuleta Bitch drawing series was pivotal. It was groundbreaking for me. I don't think anybody else has ever done that, especially the way I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be very full throated when I say that I'm very proud that I was able to pull this off. I mean, I did it I can't even tell you the trajectory
Yeah.
of that work. Um, but then I started really thinking about the Chuleta character and how she was the um she was the antagonist of all these situations. But in the quiet, I was like, oh, wait a minute, she's actually quite smart, you know what I mean? And she
Mm-hmm.
deserves her own platform to speak. Um, she deserves to be heard because even in my earnest desires to make this work, I also realized that I was silencing her. Like I've turned this hood girl into the antagonist, and I've made her the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Just a person, and she's just a person, and she's not a victim either. She's just a person in a particular circumstance with a particular set of skills who moves in a particular way. And while I am dexterous verbally, while I'm dexterous as a culturally, socially, like
Mm-hmm.
I can wear and go to a fine restaurant, and I can sit in a board meeting with people, and I can also, you know, cut it up and chop it up with dudes in the barbershop.
Yeah.
Um, not everybody has that kind of dexterity and that flexibility, but that should not negate someone's intellect. It's a different kind of intellect to navigate in the hood. And
Yep.
so I wanted to create a platform where and I also, because my mother told me, just because you're from the hood doesn't mean you have to be good. I wanted to give myself the permission to be that person that I was told I wasn't supposed to be.
Right.
And so I created this alter ego with this superhero, of the the character Chuleta, but I did it in real time. I was using YouTube as a platform to reach out to people, and
Right.
this was opportunity in this woman's voice to interrogate the art world, to interrogate systems,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm in the art world as an actual artist, and I'm recognizing that that people from the art world would not come anywhere above 96th Street in New York City. They wouldn't see it. So is a show less valuable if it's in 125th Street? But privileging white spaces versus brown run spaces.
Right.
And so I created this character to basically like trash the art world. I started doing that in 2006. By the time I got to Florida in 2010, and the stimulus of the immediate noise of the city was like just shut off.
Right.
Started doing other work, and I started doing some deeper diving. So now I got time and some resources. And so now I wanted to create these pieces around surviving domestic violence, around, um, domestic violence, abuse, problematic pregnancies and getting older, and um, violence that we see out in the streets, and the violence against our people of color. And so
Mm-hmm.
the work got a lot deeper, got much, much more profound, because it wasn't just this immediate response, and the resources to do so. And so that's that transition. And then the last big transition was this COVID Trumpian, uh,
Era.
uh, George Floyd trifecta
Yeah.
of which to me was like, it's like the mutations within our society that we're looking at right. And so I decided that I no longer wanted to perform. I've changed my stance on that. But that I thought that I'd start making sculptures um that are mutations of the wigs that I've made in previous performances. And now this becomes a sort of stand-in for my body, but also as a representation of those kinds of mutations that we see.
Curious to
Yeah.
know, what did that work look like a little bit, actually.
So there's a piece that I did where I'm wearing like this really tall crown, and I've got these giant gold curlers, and I've got like a red push-up bra, and I've got like a
Mm-hmm.
shaper thing. And that started out as it started out as an opportunity to interrogate beauty standards, Eurocentric beauty standards.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly because I was recovering from really big surgery that I wanted to I was looking at a lot of Kardashian contouring videos, right? At the
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, and I've always been fascinated how how Eurocentric beauty standards in recent history, like the last 10 years, they want blackness, but they don't want the smoke.
Yeah.
They want the heat, but they don't want the fire.
Yeah.
Um, between the body plumping and the booty
Mm-hmm.
injections and the
Yep.
weight trainers and the lip injections and the eyebrow, all this contour, all this weird shit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that it's just like, wow, y'all really want all this heat, and y'all don't want the smoke, because there's
Yep.
smoke with this, right? The
Yep.
smoke that your ancestors created. All right, so bet, let's interrogate that.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing this because, all right, my skin tone is right. And people are like, oh my God, your skin is so olive. I'm like, I'm the white girl in my family. Y'all think
Right.
are you kidding me? Um, and so like that, even that idea of darkness and light is relative to whoever's looking at you. Um, and so while I might have the skin tone, I don't have the features. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to see what it was like, what I'd have to do to contour my face to get to the Eurocentric beauty. But I
Mm-hmm.
stopped right at the marks because it looked crazy, it looked tribal, it looked like some wild shit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I made the crown to resemble to reflect the different stages of straightening my hair, from when the curls are wet to when the curls are in the rollers, from when I have like me blow dry it, but
Mm-hmm.
before you put the iron, the flat iron on it.
Yep.
So I wanted to pause at each stage of the straightening process. I wanted to pause at the contouring makeup. I even gave myself like collarbones and stuff. And I did like things to push up my breasts and try to cinch my waist. And so the point of origin of that was to interrogate Eurocentric beauty standards. But what I didn't expect to bump into was looking older pictures.
Mm. Okay. Whole other angle.
I didn't
Wow.
expect all that.
Yeah.
And so, I don't really get the opportunity to talk about that very much, but that was one of those things that I didn't expect.
So you described your new work, I believe, as moving towards radical joy. And I think I love the sound of that radical joy, not just any kind of joy. So, and you want to work on healing and rest. You have a exhibit that's going to be at the HCC art galleries. So
Yes.
what is that going to be?
So I'm hoping the goal is to create like this sort of mangrove, or it's like kind of like a bizarre mangrove, a sanctuary space, a
Mm,
chill space where you'll see some of my newest images of these women in sanctuary, like they're at rest. That's something that I've decided that I'm going to give myself as an artist. I'm going to give myself permission to make work that is not always like sell it like all right. So I've had to say this a lot recently. Um, all of the work that I've made up until this point has been the sort of like this, the characters are like alpha female, very
yeah.
strong, they take up a lot of space, they command attention, has a strong stance, and it's not, and could be viewed as celebratory, but celebratory in spite of
Mm-hmm.
that, right? So in spite of adversity, in spite of there's always something that the person has overcome to receive this sort of these accolades, to be able to, this sort of hero-like status. I don't feel like going through all that right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
why can't we just chill?
Yeah.
Right? I want to chill. I know why we can't just chill. Like I know
Yeah.
why.
But
But
why can't we?
for a little while, I'm creating spaces of maximum chill. Like for me, and for me, maximum chill is in the trees, in nature, um, very lush landscapes, but they're abstract landscapes. They're weird, alternate spaces. These sort of strange, idyllic utopias that I'm trying to create. Where
Mm-hmm.
the women they're not in danger. They don't have to look out in the world. They don't have to. There's always this. And I noticed this when looking across all the work that I've made. The women are always looking out and like this. Like I see you. Like I see you looking at
Yeah.
me, you know. Um, and in the new work that I'm making, like the girls are just chilling. They're safe, they're
Just being.
warm, they're fed, they're just chilling,
Mm-hmm.
chilling.
Yeah.
The fat rolls are hanging out, and boobies are out, and they're good. You know what I mean? And so,
It's overdue for you, and it's overdue for anyone who does this kind of work. Not everything has to be this, you know,
testament to the fight or moving everything forward. Sometimes things like that also move things forward.
Yes.
So, sometimes it's just, I want to do what makes me happy. And in turn, if that makes things better as well, great. You know?
Yeah, I think you know what, so I'm working on something right now, that's pretty epic. It's pretty huge. And I got a test run of people encountering it during Open Studios last week here at the McCall Art Center where my residency is right now. And the response is overwhelming joy. I saw like people like, oh my gosh, like they look so happy, they look so this, and people kind of like looking at the work and nodding, and I'm like, yeah, like it's
Yeah.
hey, like it's all right, like I want that for myself. I want to feel like, because making the other work that I make is really hard to carry what is carried to carry the
Yeah.
fallout. Like the piece that I did at the Smithsonian where I'm holding the 33 people for 3 minutes, 33 seconds. I've done that piece 3 times, 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I'm carrying for months,
Mm-hmm.
all that pain, all of it, all of it, all of it. Like, and people are like, they're letting it, and I did it on purpose. I wanted to make that work. But I'm at the point where I just like, man, it's just, we are flooded, inundated with it, you know. And I don't want to be corny and be like, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. But like, kind of,
It
yeah, like,
does.
kind of, yeah, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't want to sound funny, but like, there's plenty of people doing the justice work. And part of the justice work is creating spaces of joy and peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's with adversity is gonna be out here anyway. So I can't be of any service to my students in my classroom or anybody who's a fan of my work if I'm too exhausted.
Right. Self care, as they call it, which is very important, and everyone should take the time for it in every aspect of your life because it allows you to do other things so much better and be more available to others. So your mission has been and is to still make art that builds community, that bridges gaps, that asks questions. How do you encourage others who want to do that as well and maybe don't know where to start?
That's a great question. And it's something that I approach in my classes. The first thing is trying to figure out what your voice is. I do exercises with my students that kind of like, what do you value?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What is valuable to you? Um, and then like ask yourself, what do you have to offer? Uh, what do you have and what can you trade?
What do
And
you have and
in
what
in,
can you
in these
trade?
exercises, because those are the things that help to build a community too. It's like, well, you're not on an island. You're not an island unto yourself. So like if you want to make something, you want to make a piece of art, a video, a film, a podcast, whatever, um, you don't know how to do that, but you have some other skills you can trade. So then how do you reach out to your community network and find the people that can give you what you need, and how can you then repay them with something that you have, like whether you do graphic design or, you've got gas money, you can make lunch for the team or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
I try to encourage people to start thinking about not just the thing that they want to make, but the community that's built around the making of the thing, right? And that is how I try to encourage kids to find their voice and make their work. But it's not that you're working by yourself, because you can't really. It's never full throated because you're only just talking to a vacuum,
Yeah.
right? Or if you're just only going to respond to your YouTube people or your Instagram people, that's an echo chamber. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, building of the networks, and recognizing that you have something to offer, but that you also have things that you need. And so like, it's not just a gimme, gimme, gimme. It's like,
What
whatever
can
you
we
take,
trade?
be prepared to put something on. You gotta put something on the table if you want people to do this for you. And
Yeah.
teaching about accountability, teaching about integrity. I tell my students integrity is expensive. My students wouldn't trust me if I didn't come with integrity,
Yeah.
right? I may be goofy, I may be disorganized, whatever flaw somebody might
Yeah.
find on me, but what I know I have in spades is integrity. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And then I'm gonna if I'm putting my name on it, I believe in the product.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that kind of thing is very important. And I have to teach that.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that like with the kind of each one teach one mentality that I have, that's how that message gets spread. As being from the diaspora, being a woman of color, come from the community of color, our names are being dragged anyway. Like my mother used to always, don't give them a reason. Don't give them any more ammunition. They already have plenty.
Right.
So I take my name, my word, and integrity very seriously. So I don't need to be famous. I don't need to. I'm known, respected, and just have staying power and consistency.
Yes. Well, Wanda Raimundi Ortiz, would you
That's
please?
my name.
That's her name.
That's my name.
That's her
Got
name.
it right.
Would you please tell everybody where they can find you, your website, where they can find your work?
Sure. You can find me at www.raimundiart.com. RAIM as in Mary, UN as in Nancy, raimundiart.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Wanda_Raimundi. And yeah, man, just hit me up.
Yeah.
If you like it. Yeah, no, I'm always excited to partner with organizations and institutions, talk with young people, old people. Yeah, so hit me up, kid.
And check out her gallery when it comes to HCC Art Galleries, August 8th.
Yes,
So
yes.
everyone in town, go take a look. But thank you so much for doing this. This was really
very
fun.
much for having me.
I appreciate it. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Arts Access Florida podcast series, When Freedom Rings. You can listen to all episodes wherever you stream podcasts or watch all episodes on our YouTube channel. Just search Arts Access Florida. We can't forget to thank our sponsors, Community Foundation Tampa Bay and Gobioff Foundation. This series was created by Malika Hollis and not possible without the help of Adriana Rodriguez and more. This is a product of WUSF Public Media. Copyright 2022, WUSF Public Media.